Hello, I'm Mark from Zebra BI and welcome to the Zebra BI for Power BI product update. The new versions of our Power BI visuals are live and we are excited to show you the new features. Now let's jump right in. On Zebra BI tables, we have added a new way for variance calculation in financial statements, more formatting options for rows and grand totals, support for text measures and hyperlinks, and with version 6.7 of the tables, we are adding support for multi-level hierarchical comments. Now allow me to show you the features in action.
With table 6.6, we've added support for text measures. Now this was a heavily requested feature and should allow greater clarity with multiple attributes of the same category. Let me show you some of the common use cases. Now the first example, we want to just add an ID column next to our main category, so we can either search for that category by an ID or the name. In that case, we would typically add that ID into the category placeholder. But this in Zebra BI actually creates a hierarchy, and when we want to simply have the same attribute in the same line, this will not do. So with added text support for text columns, we can just add the business unit ID under the values placeholder, but it has to be in the second place. So the main values here, text measures below. And in this case, we simply add this new attribute here. So this could be any of text columns, so such as colors, description, attributes, and so on. The next example would, of course, be to add multiple such attributes. For instance, when you have products, right, and you have different SKUs, shipping IDs, maybe even colors of the same product, you can now add those as text columns below the main values. So always in the second and further places. In this case, now we can also search or filter by the product SKU and shipping ID. The only limitation here is that we cannot sort by those columns directly for now. So if you want to sort, you basically have to remove the sorting of the main column by clicking on it, right? So now we have no arrows here, and we can simply use the Power BI sort options here. So if we want to ship by product SKU, simply select this. If we want to also sort by product name, again, on the category, we simply use it like such. And the last example would be when we have maybe multiple customers assigned to a different salesperson. Again, we want to display the attributes one right next to the other. In this case, we can either use this way, so we have the customer and then multiple salespersons assigned, or we can switch it around. So instead of this, we would simply drop the salesperson on top and place the customer below. This also works as a hierarchy. So even if we have a hierarchy of different elements, as we do here, right, we can add an ID column. It can be a text measure that would actually create IDs based on the selection. So in this case, we have the ID displayed for the business units here and also for the customers below. And again, we can display those text columns right next to the elements. We can also sort them and rearrange them. So it's completely compatible with all of the other features of Zebra BI. In addition to text measures, we have added hyperlink support as well. So how to add hyperlinks to tables? You simply have to change the category on the hyperlink column. So for instance, here we have an URL column and we have to go to the data category and switch to web URL. Now that we've done this, we can also add this as a text column. So we can simply place it in the values placeholder. And what we'll do here is we'll add first. And now we have active hyperlinks working on the report. So we can simply just click on the hyperlink, and when we hit OK, we will navigate to our web page or wherever the hyperlink is actually pointing us towards. So this should allow you even more flexibility. You can also add details and navigational elements through here to detailed reports, and the possibilities are, of course, endless with adding hyperlinks. Zebra BI tables offer you a great way of showcasing your performance in financial statements. Whether you report all your account items as positive or keep expenses as negative, you can easily see whether the change was good or bad. Reading the variances, though, is a bit different for both cases, so let's examine them more closely. So in the classic IBCS or financial calculation, we simply report all the costs and expenses as a positive number as well. And the way we kind of indicate that an increasing cost is bad is by simply right-clicking on an element. And if we have a hierarchy, we invert all children, otherwise we simply invert that element. So in this case, we'll click invert all children, and this is the classic way of just subtracting the costs and also showcasing this on the variances. So an increase is labeled as red, and the direction is in an increasing side, so to the right-hand side. Now, there's also another approach in which we report the costs as negative. And in that case, we don't need to invert the numbers and the meaning behind them, because a larger negative will go to the left-hand side. So an increasing cost is also a bad thing, right? As indicated by a red color. In this case, however, to keep the consistency of the direction also within the relative variance, we keep it to the left direction, even though the mathematical calculation would actually be a positive number. So this is the financial approach of showcasing those costs. But with version 6.5, we've added more flexibility in how you can show this by also enabling the relative variance to be calculated with a mathematical formula. In that case, the absolute and relative variance will not share the same direction, but the relative variance will be mathematically correct. So you can enable this just by going into the chart settings under Format Visual, and here you will find now a new setting called the Calculate Relative Variance. So here we can switch between the financial calculation or the mathematical calculation. Typically, you will just then keep that same calculation for the entire report, so you can also apply this setting across all your reports with a JSON setting and then apply it there. But you can also target it with a bookmark, so you can switch between the two possible scenarios. And the previous problem that we are now addressing is that, as you can see, with the custom calculation added here, so even with a custom calculation and the financial approach, you are unable to show that the costs that have increased into the negative are actually a bad thing. But now with the mathematical variance calculation, both the custom column and the automatic variances will share the same direction and will also convey the same message, that an increasing cost is, of course, a bad thing. This new setting should now cover even more possible reporting scenarios. So even if it's an absolute necessity for you to present expenses as negative numbers, you can now present the insights in your desired approach. With the new tables, we have added the ability to add a row background color. Previously, you were already able to emphasize rows with the highlight feature, and in this case, you would just simply go to right-click on your format and highlight. So in this case, we can highlight a chart element with a particular color. And just click Save, and now we have this row highlighted. However, in cases where we want to highlight a row where we don't have a chart element, for instance, if we switch to the table view, this of course will not be shown. Only if we use a chart type, the highlight feature will be applicable to the tables. Now, in some cases, we want to highlight maybe a row background color, the same way we can emphasize a column. So what we can do now is just simply right-click on the row And under Format, we now have a row background color also to select. In this case, of course, we want to use less saturated color, maybe a light blue or a light gray. And in that case, we can just highlight this particular row. Once we're done, we simply click Save, and this will stick to that element. Even if we increase or decrease the number of others here, the row will still stay highlighted. And it remains so in both views. The same can be done also on the total row. So with this new feature, we've added more flexibility with highlighting a particular row. We have added a new toggle for turning off the charts on the grand total row. Let me show you an example where this makes sense. So you'll find a new setting if you go into the Format Your Visual, Chart Settings, and Chart on Grand Total. Now, if we turn this off, we will remove all the charts from the grand total row. Now, this makes sense in certain cases where the individual variances and elements are more important for the analysis. So, if I have this on and the variances in total are, of course, much bigger than the individual ones, we will be using all this real estate for the grand total row because of course, of the correct scaling of the visual elements. But let me exaggerate this even further. If I only have these variances, right, the entire space of the column is used basically by the grand total row. So if we turn this to off, because we're more interested in the individual variances comparison, we can make the visual smaller to still keep the same meaning in terms of visual analysis. So this should make a small improvement towards better understanding of those variances. As we keep adding new features to the tables, we also want to give report creators more precise control over end-user interactions. That is why we have updated the interaction settings to better reflect the current interactivity options. So we've renamed some of the settings to better reflect those options that you have. So for instance, we can also see the column renaming and design is now a joint interaction setting. So we can completely turn off the drop-downs for the end users, so they cannot rename this, they cannot change the chart types and all the different formatting options for the design of the columns. But if you just simply want to prevent them from hiding or adding columns back, you can turn this setting also off. And there are other settings such as turning off the interactive comment box. So now all the settings should better reflect the end user interaction. Thank you for tuning in to our product update. We hope you like the new upgrades and make sure to check out the changelog on our website for a complete list of improvements and bug fixes. Thank you for your ongoing support and see you in the next update.